All right, so we're going to be going over all of the landmarks that you are required to know for next week's quiz or for your practicum one, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. Okay, so for this one, this is called the clavicle, right? So remember, it's this collarbone. It has a kind of like more rounder end and then a more kind of flatter end. The next one you got to know is these three structures here. So right here, we're looking at an anterior view. Okay, and then we can see that over here on the lateral side, this is our coracoid process. That was that crow's beak, okay? So that's coracoid process. Then we have this indentation here, which is this entire thing. This would be your glenoid cavity, or you can sometimes say fossa. Okay, there's one more structure, which is located up at the top. This is the acromion. Okay, and the acromion is found mainly on the posterior end of the scapula, but you can still kind of see it coming out at you from the anterior side. On the posterior side of the scapula, we're going to see this sharp ridge. This right here is called your scapular spine. You can just say spine of the scapula. You could also appreciate here the glenoid cavity. Okay, so remember that's that lateral aspect. So this is going to be where the head of the humerus, so it's a really wonky humerus, but it's going to be sitting there. So we're looking at a left humerus and a left scapula. Okay, so this is our humerus bone. And remember not to mistake it with the femur. We're going to be taking a look at some of the structures that are found anteriorly and also proximally, and then we'll go into the more distal ones. So we can see here that this is one of the easiest structures here. This is the head of the humerus. Then we have these two kind of like large bumps here. We have this one and this smaller one. The bigger one is going to be the greater tubercle. Then the smaller one will be the lesser tubercle. Okay. Then we have on the kind of like lateral aspects, remember the head, which is right here, is always pointing medial. Right, so over here is going to be lateral, so to this direction will be lateral. And this is our deltoid tuberosity. Down below, we can see a couple of more things, which are going to be on the medial surface, the same surface as our head, is the medial epicondyle. Okay, we can also see, if we zoom in here, we can see that we have our trochlea and our capitulum. So this is our trochlea, and then here's our capitulum, right? This is the same view, right? We're looking here would be our medial epicondyle, and then here would be our trochlea, and then the spherical one would be our capitulum. There's one last structure that you can see that's, right, this was our trochlea if you outlined it. Right above it, it's a small little depression, and this depression here is our coronoid fossa. Okay, remember the coronoid fossa, this is where the coronoid process of ulna will sit. Okay, so it kind of comes into contact here, which we'll see in a little bit. It's really small and kind of hard to see, but right, this was our capitulum. Somewhere over here, there's a tiny little bump, so we can just say in this general region here, this would be our lateral epicondyle. Okay, because remember, this was our medial epicondyle. All right. Then let's go to the back. This is one last structure that is mainly seen from a posterior side, and it's this really long, really large kind of cavity here. This is going to be your olecranon process. Okay. Remember, the olecranon process of the humerus sits with the olecranon, the olecranon fossa. Sorry, this is the olecranon fossa. Will sit with the olecranon process of the ulna. All right, so this was fossa, because fossa means a cavity. All right, so is this a left or right? Remember, we gotta kind of look at that head, and that head is pointing medial. Right here, this is an anterior view. And then, because I know I don't see that olecranon fossa. So in this case, this would be looking at a left humerus. We're looking at somebody's left humerus on the table. Okay, let's keep going. So again, here we can see this is looking at somebody's left side. And then we'll kind of go to the actual bones. So this is your ulna. And the ulna, remember, how you look at it on the image, it starts off a little bit bigger. As it goes downwards to the distal point, it gets a lot skinnier. Okay, so this is called the ulna, and it's the medial bone in your forearm, okay? So it's found closer to you. There's a large structure on the ulna that is on the more proximal surface, and it's kind of like this large cavity. This is called your trochlear notch. Down below, immediately underneath it, is the coronoid process. And we just talked about that coronoid fossa on the humerus, but this is the coronoid process of the ulna. You don't need to know radial notch for 120, so we're going to kind of skip over that one. We're going to go to the next ones. And we can see, let's go down to the last one, or one of the last ones, which is found on the distal end. This is your styloid process. Styloid process of ulna. Right, so we're still looking at the ulna here. There's one last structure that we forgot to kind of mention, and that's behind the trochlear notch. Remember, that was the olecranon. That was the olecranon, or you can also say olecranon process. And remember, this is what sits in that olecranon fossa of the ulna. Of the humerus. We're still looking at ulna here. All right, let's look at the radius now. So the radius has two structures that you need to know. And remember, the radius, it starts off kind of small. As it goes out, kind of grows a lot larger in size. And then the first one is pretty easy. It's the head. And you got to be specific. You got to say head of radius. Okay, on the distal portion, we have another part that is called the styloid process. Okay, so the styloid process of the radius, very similar to the styloid process of the ulna, which we saw right here. So just the kind of edge portion of it. Just to kind of, you can see it again. There's that styloid process of the radius. And then we'll kind of skip these, but let's get into the actual hand and kind of talk about the different bones that we can see. So right here, we can see we have our carpal bones. These are our carpals. And then when we get down, right, in the actual palms of our hand, we have the metacarpals. Okay. And then the stuff that you can actually wiggle with your fingers, so everything in this last one, these are called your phalanges. Okay, so let's go over the metacarpals first. So, right, this is our thumb, right? If I kind of outlined, this would be our pinky down here. So here's pinky, here's the thumb. So we're going to start with the thumb. That's always number 1. So this is number 1. So this is the first metacarpal. Here's our second, here's our third, fourth, and fifth. Right, and then we get to separate things, which is the phalanges. They can be divided into 3 kind of separate groups, which I'll talk about these that are inside first. These are called our proximal. This is our proximal phalanx, right? Our proximal phalanges is plural. So if we're talking about, let's say, this one here in specific, we would have to say the complete name of this guy is the 5th proximal phalanx. You would have to write the entire thing to get full credit, okay? So it's 3 parts to it. The number, which one is it of that category or of that row, and then what type of finger is it. So it's a phalanx. So those are proximal phalanxes again. Now we're going to talk about the 4 middle phalanxes here. Okay, so the first one starts on digit 2, remember, because our thumb does not have that middle phalanx. So our middle phalanx, here we have, we can say that this is technically the first one. This would be the second, third, and fourth. It's kind of confusing, but you can also, so you can say this, or you can also say that this is the second digit, the middle phalanx. Okay, so you could say that that's that middle phalanx right there. So you got to tell me that it's what digit is it of, and then that'll be correct. And then these last ones here, which are really teeny tiny, are your, so everything in here, these are your distal phalanxes. Okay, and then again, the numbering's the same. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Cool. So let's get down to the pelvis now. In the pelvis, we're going to talk about a couple of different things. And the first one is going to be the kind of larger structures that you can see, right? So this is a fully articulated pelvis. We have the left and the right ones. So down at the center, there's this connection point between the left and the right pelvis. So you can also see it here. This is your pubic symphysis. Okay, so pubic symphysis. Then the thing I made you guys talk into, right? I said, hello, operator. We have our obturator foramen. And whenever you see the term foramen, that means an opening. So here are our openings here. You can also see the larger structure here, which is the acetabulum. And these are really important because this is where the head of your femur will sit. Okay, so now let's see. We have, of course, this is also talking about the sacrum in the back. And let's see. Right, so here we can see this is one individual coxal bone. So up at the top, we have our ilium. Over here, we have in blue, we have our ischium, which is posterior. So this is posterior. Put that in parentheses. This is superior. And the last one would be our pubis, which is always going to be anterior. Okay, so again, one of the things that we can see here our obturator foramen. We can see our acetabulum here. And then there are some specific structures that you can also see, from the kind of like, if we look here, all of this side would be posterior. This is anterior. So there's some structures on the ilium, which is right here. Right, so all of this would be ilium territory. You can see that over here, there's this small little bump, which is our acis, but you got to write the full name, which is the anterior, superior, iliac spine Remember, this is the thing that's going to be pointing kind of like anteriorly. It's also at the top, and then we know it's part of the ilium, and it's a bump. There's this ridge here that is called the iliac crest. Okay, and that's the superior part of it. And then, so here is your ischial tuberosity, found on the posterior side of the ischium. So remember, if I say like bumpy structure, or maybe if I say like what is this rough structure, or if I'm tagging this general region, that would be that ischial tuberosity. Okay, let's move on to the femur. Okay, so remember, the femur is very similar to the humerus, where it has a head and that's always pointing medial, right? So this is going to be pointing inwards. So let's take a look at some of the structures that we can see. So right here we can see we have the head. We have this large bump here, which is the greater trochanter. Then we have a smaller one here, which is called the lesser. Well, that looks sloppy. Lesser trochanter. Okay, so the lesser trochanter is mainly on the posterior side, but you can see a little bit of it here. And then down below, we can see we have our condyles, and down below. So we have over here, this would be our medial. Oh, my bad, this is lateral. This would be our lateral condyle. And then over here, this would be our medial condyle. Okay, and then this is a tiny little bump above it, so this would be our medial epicondyle. All right, again, here's our head. Here's our greater trochanter, and then our lesser trochanter is on the opposite end. So this is looking at a posterior view, and down below, again, we can see our large condyles. So this would be our medial again, and then here's our lateral condyle. And then this little bump up here is our lesser trochanter. All right, let's keep going. So this is your tibia, and this is the medial bone in your leg. Up at the top, it's very kind of like large, gets a lot smaller as it goes out distally. The structures that you need to know, there's a couple of them. The first is going to be this one right here. This is technically like this whole region is our medial condyle. And know that's the medial condyle because if you look down here, this was that thing that you technically, that I said that sometimes you can hit it and it's really painful. So this is our medial malleolus. So remember, everything on this side is going to be medial. Everything on the other side, that is lateral. So there is our lateral condyle. Okay, so everything over here is lateral. And then there's one last structure. This is kind of a zoomed in version, but this is a bump here where essentially we will have some attachment for the patella. So this is our tibial tuberosity. Remember, tibia, and then a tuberosity just means a large bump. This is our fibula, right? So our fibula kind of looks like a wand, and the first structure that you need to know or for 120 is essentially down here, and it's going to be kind of more sharper versus the head is a little bit more round. So this is our lateral malleolus. Okay, and it's going to be pointing laterally. Next up, we have our foot, and this is the last set of bones. So this is looking at a right foot, and I know that because over here is my big toe. Then I have the other one, middle one, and then we have our pinky. So essentially, we're going to be looking at the two tarsal bones. So there's the one up here, which is a lot more superior. Then there's one down below, So the one up here is called our talus. The one down here, which is the largest, is called our calcaneus. All right. And then we get to these group of toes, or not toes, sorry, these bones, which are called our metatarsals. And then just like the big toe, just like the thumb, we have our big toe being number 1, number 2, 3, 4, and 5, all the way down to the pinky. So again, you'd have to say this is the first metatarsal. And then we have our phalanges, and remember they're numbered the exact same way as the fingers. So this is the ones I'm labeling right now. Those are our proximal phalanxes. So proximal phalanges or singular proximal phalanx. And then we have our middle ones. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the middle phalanx. And then we have, again, 5 of the distal ones, which are the little ones. Okay, so those would be our distal phalanx. All right, well, that's it. Let me know if you have any questions. Best of luck, guys.